We are going to start out with how to make text with rhinestones. There are programs out there that can simplify making rhinestone text, but I'm going to show you how to do it by hand within the CorelDRAW program with some easy features within Corel on how to make rhinestone templates in general, but we're going to start out with text primarily. If you were to buy a rhinestone font, it'd pretty much be already set up for you to fit rhinestones in it. So this is if you don't have any of those fonts or you don't have a program to simplify making templates or designs with rhinestones. So we're going to use CorelDRAW, and I'm using X5, which is the latest version out right now. But all of the steps are pretty much similar throughout the other versions of Corel. I'm just happen to be using the latest version that's out right now. So whenever you're creating something with rhinestones, you have to take into factor the width of the rhinestone itself, and you want to choose something to start out with that's thicker and bolder, so you kind of have to think outside the box when you're creating a design. So I'm going to start with just a basic font. We're going to do the word sparkle because that's what rhinestones do, and we're going to make it pretty big so we can see on screen. And I'm going to change the font to something real bold. I'm going to change the size. Okay, so say the customer wanted like a 3x10 word sparkle and they wanted it in rhinestones. There's a few different ways to go about it. You could make the word sparkle with an outline of stones, or you could do a fill of stones. So first I'm going to show you how to just do an outline of stones. I'm going to show you a quick way to do it and then a more complicated way to do it, so you can decide whatever works best for the design that you're working on. So first I need to view this in wireframe because the fill color is throwing me off, and instead of changing it, I'm just going to change my view method to wireframe at the top of Corel. So I'm really only seeing the vector line or the path of the line that's creating this design. So now I need to start making my holes or my circles for my stones. Well, how big are my stones? It's very important to know what type of stone you're working with, like the size of it, so you can create the actual template correctly. If you are off of the stone size, then your stones won't fall into place properly, and by the time it comes to putting the stones in there, you'd have already wasted a lot of production time if you didn't know this ahead of time. So wherever you get your stones from, they should be able to tell you or guide you in the right direction of which stone size you should create within your graphic design itself, the template you're making. And here it will tell me not only how to heat apply them, but towards the bottom it tells me cutting specs, like how much force I need to use, as well as my rhinestones or rhinestud size. So if I'm buying a 3mm stone, as you can see, my hole size is not 3mm exactly. You need a little bit of leeway for the stone to fall into place, plus be facing the right way. So the actual hole size that you would make for the template is 3.3mm. Or for rhinestones, if you're buying a stone size of 16, it's going to tell you that the hole size that you need to make in your graphic art program is 4.3mm. So I'm just going to say we're using a 3mm rhinestud. So I know that 3.3 is the stone size or hole size that I need to make. So back to Corel, I have my circle selected, a perfect circle here, and I have right now my Corel set to inches, my unit of measurement to inches, and I don't want to keep converting back and forth from inches to millimeters, so I'm just going to type in 3.3 mm and hit enter on my keyboard, and it will, as long as my proportionate lock is my lock ratio is turned on, I should be able to just type that in and just hit enter, and it will pop it to be exactly, it'll convert it for me. So now I have my 3.3mm circle on my screen. I need to make a duplicate of that, so I'm just going to click my mouse and drag it, and then right click my mouse. So if you select something or select an object like the circle with your mouse, left click, just a regular good old left click, and then drag it somewhere on your screen, you see like a duplicate just kind of floating out there in space. And then if you right click your mouse, then it's a little trick and it will just automatically make a duplicate, so you don't have to keep going to copy and paste or control C Control V. It's just a quick way to make a duplicate without having to use those other shortcuts and really not having to press any other buttons besides your mouse. So if I wanted to make several duplicates, just left click my mouse, drag, and right click my mouse, and it makes another duplicate. But really I only need 2 of these, so I'm just going to delete 2 of these to get them off our screen so we're not distracted. And I select my first circle, and then I need to turn on my blend tool. So here on the left, I'm over my blend tool. I just click on that. I select the first circle and drag it to the next circle, and it kind of pops into place, and what it does is it makes a blend or several circles from the first original to the next one that I selected. Several, they blend together. So now I want to go over to the top where it says Path Properties, and if I hit the little corner triangle down arrow, it'll give me some options, and I want to say I want a new path. And then I have to point out what I want a new path to, and I want this path to go to the sparkle here, which is this word, the word that I typed down on my screen. Well, as you can see, it put it on the path of the S, but they're still kind of all bunched together. So what do I want it to do? I want to go to my More Blend options and hit the down arrow, the little triangles, to have more options, and I want to blend it along the full path. And it's going to take however many blends it could fit between one destination to the other that I dragged it from, and it's going to spread it out amongst the whole entire path. And I can manipulate the amount of blended objects in this box here, where it says 20 right now is the amount of circles that were originally in my blend path. I can change it to like 500. I can change it to 50, whatever. So, but primarily you want just a little bit of distance between the stones themselves. You don't want too much distance between the stones. If you do, then the actual little lip that the blade, when it's cutting through the stencil material that we carry is 15 mil thick. It's thicker than vinyl, obviously. It needs to be, because it needs to be wide enough to hold those stones. But primarily, if you cut the circles too far apart or too close together, when you're going to brush those stones on top of those holes to fall into place, they're going to get caught on the lip of the circle that it cut itself. So it's going to be either more production time. So you kind of just want a little bit less than the actual width of the circle itself. So you can play around with the total amount by increasing or decreasing the amount of objects that are blending on a path. So as you can see, here we have a lot of circles on a path, and we could get rid of this original line and be done with it. But focusing on some of these designs, you'll see that some of these circles are actually overlapping each other, and it's not really going to work out. It's not like said and done as quick as what I showed you. So there are some things that you may not be able to get away with by just simply putting stones on a blended path, especially with text when you have sharp corners and things like that. So what's another way to produce a text with rhinestones if you don't actually have a rhinestone font? So I'm going to start out with a new page, and then we're going to go to the next method, which involves breaking up the actual font to segments, and then actually creating these stones onto a path of each segment, and that kind of gives you more control over where the stones are going to be placed. So I'm just going to get a new page. Okay, so now I have a font that not only is it a script font, but it has thick and thinner points, so it's a little bit more challenging than that Arial black that I had demonstrated before, that still had stones overlapping each other and still would have needed some manipulation. So the first thing I want to do is get rid of my fill color. So I'm just going to view it in wireframe, and whenever you're working with a script font, you'll see that the lowercase letters, they overlap. So you have to weld everything first together, which is arrange, shaping, and weld. And you'll see that now everything is connected. So if I were to just create a 3.3 millimeter circle on a path for something like this, then it's not going to, I already know that things are not going to overlap in the corners correctly. It's not going to be as pretty as I wanted it to be. So the first thing I need to do, and because I welded everything together, you'll see that my status on my Corel has changed from a true type font or artistic text to now a curve. So now it's considered an object. So it's uneditable. I can't go back into my text tool and say I want this to say, you know, Prince instead of princess now. So you pretty much want to make sure that your spelling's correct, your font's chosen before you weld everything, because now it's considered an object. And because it is an object, I can break it all up. So I'm going to go to Arrange, and I'm going to break everything up. So break curve apart means I'm separating each part of this, the inner cavities from the outer cavities. So I just got rid of the fill color. Instead of viewing in wireframe, I'm viewing in normal view, and I'm just right-clicking on my mouse on my color palette to show you that you know, these are all different objects now. I'm going to assign them different colors just to show. Even the dot of the I is considered its own object. But even if I were to create a stone on this path, I'm still going to have problems, especially on the corners here. I'll do that as a demonstration just to show my point. If I were to draw a circle and make it 3.3 millimeters, to fit a 3mm stone. Make a duplicate by left clicking my mouse, dragging, right clicking my mouse, going to my blend tool, clicking and dragging from one circle to the other, telling my path properties that I want it to go on this new path, and I want it to go along the entire full path. I may get lucky depending on how many stones I have in there, and everything will fit in the corners nice and snug. But as you can see, no, like this corner at the top left of my inner cavity of the P, it's not in the corner where I want it to be, plus it's kind of overlapping in this area here. And things may need to be manipulated to accommodate your rhinestone, so you may have to actually start editing your design to do that. So I don't want to go that route, so I'm just going to undo that. And we're going to break this up even more. So how do I break up this object? Because it is just a whole object even more. Well, you do it node by node. So with my shape tool, I'm going to select the corner node of the inner cavity of my P, and then I'm going to go over to my node editing tools and break the curve. So I'm going to break apart that link, that chain that linked those two nodes together. And I'm going to do the same with this corner node. I'm going to click on the corner node and I'm going to break it apart. And then I'm going to go to Arrange, and I'm going to break the curve apart even more. So because I broke the link in the chain, those two nodes that linked, you know, this line, this green line from this blue line, now they are even their own objects. So I've even broken up even more. And I can even manipulate this inner part of the P to be maybe a little bit wider, or I can get rid of it altogether, depending on, you know, what you're trying to, how significant it is to your design. I just know it's going to look like a mess because those rhinestones are going to be way too close, but this is a characteristic of the font and maybe actually part of the logo you can't get rid of, you know, because it's a copyrighted logo, whatever it is. You may have to manipulate it just a bit to accommodate a stone or the path of a stone. So that's broken up even more. So now let's see what happens when I take my blend and I tell it to go along this path, this new path, which now only consists of just this blue part of this line here. And I tell it to blend along the full path. You know, it looks a little bit better. You'll notice that I always have a stone at my corner points, which is, you know, a bonus for me because that's what I want it to look like. And I can manipulate the amount of stones on just that path to accommodate, you know, the distance between each stone. A stone falls nicely in corner of each path. I think this looks a lot more cleaner than what it did when it just originally went along the entire path of the inner cavity of the P. So now I have to kind of do the same for this outer line of the P. And as you can see, this method is a little bit more tedious because you have to break everything up and treat everything as its own, but the results are a lot better. So I'm just going to do the same method. I'm going to draw a circle. I'm going to make that circle 3.3 millimeters. Select the circle, left click it, drag it, right click. Go to my blend tool, click and drag from one to the other. Tell my path properties I want a new path and I want it to be this green line now. And I want it to blend along the entire green line. And then I want to maybe manipulate the amount of stones I have. I'm going to say 35. That's a lot. Let's try 30. Okay. Now, because you had two lines that were kind of connecting into each other, I'm just going to pop one of these up a little bit just to break it up, and you'll see that at the end of each line there always will be a duplicate, because it's always going to make sure that there's that circle along the entire path, and the starting point of that path is the end of that line. But those lines touch, so eventually a circle is going to overlap. So if you're cutting a template, it will cut twice in that area. So I do recommend that you end up breaking away all of these. Eventually, when you're done creating all of your circles along all of, you know, your paths or your lines, your segments of the object that you broke up, you break the blend apart, which will break the circle away from your line, so you can eventually delete that line. But you can also delete that one corner circle too, and delete this one as well. But you want to avoid having duplicate circles on top of each other, because it's just going to cause your blade to cut twice in that area. And now you can bring this back down. And it looks much more uniform, like it's meant to be within that path. So now we're just going to do a quick one on, because now we have this script, and this script, you know, contains a lot of curves within the entire design. What kind of manipulations do we have to do on something like this? Well, first I'm going to figure out some corner nodes. I know for sure that, you know, this area is a starting point for the line on the top half of the word. So if I select that node and I break it apart, then I can do the same at the end of the word. Just select the node. I'm going to click on this corner node here and then have the option to break it apart. So now that I've done that, I can go to my arrange and break the curve apart, truly making this part of the cursive its own segment or object. So I just assign that to be blue to show you as an example. And you have some segments over here that are vertical, you know, that may, technically they should be probably broken up too, but we're going to take a chance here and we're going to see how these stones fall along the path of just this top part of the cursive line. So first I need to make my stone, and you know, maybe you changed your stone size up too. Maybe you have a different stone size that you need to make depending on what you're doing. You're using all different kinds of stones. Because you are custom making this template, you can mix and match stones. You know, you may not want to just stick with the 3mm stone. You may have to go smaller or larger in some areas, not only to give your design more characteristics, but just to fit in these really small, tiny crevices. I mean, we're working with a really big word right now. It's just an example. But you know, you can imagine if you had a really small, thin segment, you may have to, you know, manually place a couple stones here and there and replace some of these circles that are on this blend path to try to manipulate the design so it flows nicely. So it really looks like a cursive word. So I just made a duplicate. I left clicked on it and then dragged and right clicked. Go into my blend tool. And I'm just kind of repeating all the steps that I've made, except I'm telling it to blend along this new path I made. And then I'm going to tell it to go along the entire path. And then I'm going to fill it up. I think it looks a lot cleaner. So you're basically just breaking up, you know, segments. Here you may have 3 segments that you need to break up. As an example. So you could select the node on this corner, break it up, on this corner, break it up, and this corner, break it up. Go to Arrange, break curve apart. Now technically you should have 3 separate parts. You have this side of the cavity, you have this one. I'm just choosing different colors just to show. So you have brown, this black. I'm going to change it to be a brighter color so you can see it. And you would just put circles on a path for each segment, and then if there's any duplicating circles that are in the corner of each segment, you would just pick one of them and delete it. So everything kind of flows nice together. Here we have something overlapping, which is kind of a good example that you may have to manipulate in this area. So you kind of want to, you know, skim through everything and make sure that there's nothing overlapping, because this wouldn't work right, especially if you weeded it. So the first thing we have to do is select the line so we can break the blend away from the line. So we go to Arrange and break blend apart. And then we select the circle, and you want to ungroup them. So now I can choose just one circle. So I could technically delete one of these and I could just put it here, because remember, you're getting rid of this line here, so you're really just using it as kind of like a map. Now I'm going to demonstrate how to create some text for rhinestones in a template that not only includes an outline of the rhinestones around the text itself, but also a fill of rhinestones. So this is if you want to create a word or text completely full of rhinestones, and the inside of the wording as well as the outside. So to start off, I have just some Greek letters here, and I'm going to do the basic outline first. First I need to find out what my rhinestone size should be. So I'm going to go to where I had purchased the rhinestones and go to their technical sheet, their application instructions, and find out what size hole I should be making within my graphic program, which is CorelDRAW X5 that I'm using. So I'm going to be using rhinestones, the size 16, the SS16 size. So here it tells me that I need to make my hole size 4.3 millimeters. So now that I know that information, I can go ahead and start making my design. First, I want to change how I'm viewing this. I'm going to get rid of the fill color of this text here. so I can work by line so I can truly see what's going on. And I'm just going to right click on a different color so I can just see an outline of my text. And then I'm going to make a hole size. I'm just going to draw a circle. I'm just going to hold my control key on my keyboard and click and drag my circle, and it will make a perfect circle. And then within the size, I'm going to just type in what it said to do, which was 4.3 millimeters, and hit enter on my keyboard, and it's going to convert, because right now I have my Corel set to inches, so instead of converting back my unit of measurement from inches to millimeters, if you just type in mm, it will go ahead and do that for you. So now it has converted it to a 4.3 millimeter circle, and I'm just going to start my basic steps of creating a rhinestone template around my design. I'm just going to click my circle, drag, right click my mouse. It's going to create a duplicate. I'm going to select my blend tool, click and drag from one circle to the other, and then I'm going to tell my path properties that I want these circles to follow along a new path, which is this ZTA. And then I want to tell my more blend options to blend along the full path. And now I can control how many blended objects I want. I'm going to guess 200 to see how that looks. I'm going to change it to 175 to see how that looks. What I'm doing is looking for just a little bit of distance between the circles. I don't want a ton of distance, because if your distance between your circles, when you cut your rhinestone template, it will create like a little lip around it, and your stone could technically like butt up against that lip and it wouldn't fall into place properly, so your production could be slowed down a little bit. We are going to have to fine tune this anyways, so I'm going to demonstrate that in this tutorial. I could break down each segment if I wanted to and create stones along the holes along the path precisely from corner to corner, but since we're just filling this in anyways, it's just going to look really sparkly, and we picked a nice bold font, so they're going to be able to tell what it says. Alright, so now that I have my stones along the path of the ZTA, then I can go ahead and start creating the fill. And I'm just going to do this the easiest way that I feel. There may be easier ways out there, but this is the way that I feel is the easiest way to do it. So I'm just going to start another circle, hold my control key down, click and drag my mouse, and it will make a perfect circle. Let go of your mouse before your control key to make a perfect circle. And then I'm going to change my size, 4.3 mm, enter on my keyboard, and it converts it for me. Then I'm going to turn on my step and repeat. So that's found under edit. If you go to step and repeat, and now I can start telling the program to make so many objects within along a horizontal or vertical path. So I'm going to do a horizontal path only. So I'm going to turn this off. I want to turn off my vertical setting to no offset. And I want my horizontal, wanted it to be similar to what this spacing is in between from the amount of objects that I chose. So to figure that out, I'm just going to view this in wireframe real quick so I can truly see the lines without any fill or without any line width assigned to it. And I'm just going to draw an object. You don't have to be precise, but you know, just want to be similar. And I'm going to figure, okay, so the distance between there is actually 0.115. So I want to be kind of similar to that, so I'm going to use that as my guide. Now I can tell the spacing between the objects. I want it to be close to that same size, so 0.115. And I'm going to guess 50 across. Hit apply, and the Corel will automatically generate 50 circles at the distance of 0.115. So now I want to do about the same, but down. So I'm going to turn off my horizontal centering, turn on my vertical, I want to say the spacing between the object is going to be 0.118. But I actually only want one line, and I'm going to explain why in just a minute. And I want my distance to be again 0.115 and hit apply, and it's going to create another line underneath there. Just kind of go down here a little bit so you can see. Okay, so now I have exactly the same circles, another row underneath it. But I don't want my row to be like right on top of each other. I want them to be kind of staggered off. So I'm going to select just that new row that I just created, and I'm going to start to move it so they're in a staggered pattern, because it's more eye-catching that way. Plus you have a better chance of filling up the area more completely that way. And I'm just kind of guesstimating, because you're going to end up maneuvering these anyways, because not everything falls directly in place when you're dealing with little tiny circles like this. So now, instead of using my step and repeat to create additional lines offset of each other, I'm just going to select both of these lines and then just guesstimate by clicking and dragging my mouse down. You can hold your control key if you like, so you have more control over all these objects moving at one time. But I'm just going to drag them down and then right click my mouse, and it's going to create a duplicate. Control R, and it's going to continue on that repeat. It's just Control R is just going to keep repeating the last step that you made. So I'm continuously making a whole area full of these circles that are 4.3 with, you know, spacing in between that's pretty consistent. So now I want to select all of these circles and make them one object, because I want to end up intersecting, which is capturing only the circles inside of an object. So to do that all at once, I have to make sure they're not grouped together, they're not all separate objects. Grouping and combining is different. Combining is making all of these single objects one object, where grouping is just making a bunch of different objects grouped on the page so you can move them around at the same time. So it's a different meaning. So I need to combine those to make my intersect option a lot easier and quicker. So now I have my ZTA, and I'm going to go back to view this in normal view, because I was in wireframe, so I could really see, you know, truly just the vector line without any point value assigned to my line width. But I want to see where these stones will fill in the ZTA to get my best estimate of, you know, where I should intersect these stones. So I'm just going to go ahead and drag it down on top. And I assigned the stones and the line a different color. It might be helpful if you just right click on a different color on your color palette, so both the circles that you had blended along the path and the line itself, the original shape, are the same colors, so you can determine which stones will be filling in and which ones will be going around the design. And you don't have to be perfect. You're just looking for, you know, the majority of the stones to fill in. Obviously this is not going to be, you know, dead on. We're going to have to maneuver some of these, but this is the quickest way to hand make this without having to buy a program specifically that has fonts with fills in it at different sizes. So if you already have Corel and you want to start doing this without buying an additional program, then you're able to. So now I have a good guesstimate of where my circles are going to end up being on the path. So I want to select just the line of the ZTA only. And I'm going to be able to tell if I have just that line selected by my status bar at the bottom of Corel. So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit so I have a better visual. Select my selection tool, and I'm just trying to select just the line of the text. And I can tell that I have just the text selected because my status bar here at the bottom of Corel tells me I have controlled text. I happen to have Stahl's Mega Greek font installed in this computer. So that is the font that is telling me that I have selected, and not actually the group of all the objects on a path. So what I can do now is just make a duplicate or copy of that. I'm just going to go hit Control C and then Control V on my keyboard, and that is going to make a copy of just my ZTA lines, just the text itself. So now I can select the circle, the original one that I dragged down here by just selecting my one of those pink circles, or the original circles on a path. And I can tell that I have those selected because my status bar will change and tell me that I have a blend on a path group on layer 1. So now I can drag those up out of the way. And then this is where, I have the leftover, just the text showing me where the circles filled in the best. So now I want to intersect all of the circles. I just want to capture only the circles that are falling inside of the text itself. So as you can see, I just want to select just the text. So it says artistic text is selected. Hold my shift key down and select the object that I want to capture within that text. So I can select any one of those circles because I combined them. They're considered all the same object anyways. And at the top here you have all of your shortcut options. You have your weld, you have your trim, and then you have your intersect, which is the third one over here. So I want to select intersect, and that duplicates only the circles that are within the original object I first selected, which was the text. So now technically I can just click on any one of these outside circles and just delete them to get them off my screen. So I've captured only what's in the inside. Now to get those circles inside of the ZTA, the one above it, all I need to do is just select one of them and I can just drag it up and roughly put them into place. Might be off a little bit, might have to maneuver here and there a little bit. And then this I just used as a guideline, this ZTA down here, so I just hit delete and get rid of it. So now I can start zooming in here and cleaning it up. So it looks like I might need to move over a little bit. So now I need to break up all of these objects because they're all connected, and I'm going to have to move them around because they don't fit perfectly in place. Some of them are overlapping, and you don't want your cutter to cut that because then the template isn't going to work out when you go to brush your stones in there. So I just want to go to Arrange and Break Curve Apart. And that's going to take all those circles that were filled in, and they're now all individual objects. So I can select just the circle itself and maneuver it around, make a duplicate of it, whatever I need to do to fill in the font. All these circles that are along the path also need to be broken away from the original text, and then they need to be ungrouped. So you go back up to Arrange and Ungroup, or Ungroup all actually. So technically now all of these circles are their own individual circles. So now I can get down to business and start cleaning up parts of circles that didn't fall into place right, move them around if I have to. Just go along and get rid of any duplicates or anything that doesn't belong. These have to be full circles, so anything that was cut off is worthless because if it's not a full circle, the stone's not going to fall into place, and it's not going to be a perfect circle for the stone to fall into place in the first place. So let's say here, I have an area that I can fill in. If you just drag another circle and then right click your mouse, you will make a duplicate. That's a shortcut to make a quick duplicate. You may not want to move this one over a little bit because you can fit another one here nicely. So I'm just going to drag any of the circles and then just right click. As long as you don't have a larger amount of distance between the circles, then your stone should fall into place without a problem. And it's not going to be a huge problem if your stones you know, if the area between the circles are larger than your circle width itself. But it just makes production a lot easier. So once you're done cleaning everything up, you can get rid of your actual initial text by selecting the line and then just deleting it. And then you'll have all your circles in place. If you wanted to, you could, you know, do the outline of circles in this like hot pink color, for example. You would make a separate template and you would cut only those outlines, and then the inner fill circles you could make a different color, so you could have like a 2-color rhinestone text, for example. Each color of stones is its own layer, just like screen printing. You know, each color is its own layer, so you'd want to cut your own template for that. You would brush only that color into those stone holes and then mask it, and then you'd bring it all together on the same mask to make a multiple color rhinestone design. Another idea to make text for rhinestones within CorelDRAW, if you're hand making text and you don't have a program that automates fonts for you, then you can simply do it in Corel. And what I like to do is actually make a whole bunch of circles and then delete the circles to resemble letters. So the quickest way to make a bunch of circles in Corel is to use step and repeat. But before I do that, I need to make sure that I make the correct hole size. It's very important when you're working with rhinestones that you refer to your guide that tells you that if you buy a stone a certain size, that you have to cut your hole a little bit bigger for the stones to fall into place upright correctly. So, for example, if I'm using rhine studs for this design and I'm going to purchase the 5mm size stone, my guide tells me that I need to make a hole size at 5.3 millimeters. So now that I know that information, I can start making my design. So within Corel, the first thing I'm going to do is make a circle with my ellipse tool. So if you hold your control key on your keyboard and click and drag your ellipse tool, it'll make a perfect circle. Let go of your mouse before your control key and your circle is made. Now Corel, right now I have my unit of measurement in inches, but I want to make a millimeter circle, just one circle, so I don't want to have to change my unit of measurement back and forth. So if you just type in 4.3 and then put an mm at the end of it, it'll convert it for you. So that's just a quick trick on that. So now that I have one circle that is the correct size, I can make a bunch of circles, and the easiest way is to use step and repeat. If you go to Edit, Step and Repeat, it'll give you an option to make a bunch of circles or a bunch of objects on a horizontal or vertical path. So I'm going to start with my horizontal path, so I'm just turning my vertical settings to no offset. And I have my horizontal settings, the spacing between objects. Now this is in millimeters. You want to make sure that your design is, what the actual space is, not larger than your stone itself, but you don't want it to be too close together. So conversion for inches to millimeters is to divide it by 25.4. So if my stone size is 5.3 millimeters, what is that in inches? What I can do is divide that by 25.4 to find that information out. My conversion is a little bit, it's about 0.2. So what I'm going to do is 0.15 and hit apply. And I'm choosing a number of copies at 50. I'm just taking a wild guess. Hopefully that's long enough to accommodate my word. You could make it a lot longer if you wanted to. So now that I have 50 circles that are 0.5 in diameter at a distance of 0.15 inches apart, I can make another duplicate going towards the bottom. So I'm going to turn off my horizontal setting and turn on my vertical. And I want the spacing between the objects to be the same. And I could even leave this at 50 at this point. And it will make like a big square full of them. It's kind of long, but to understand how many it would make. So I don't need that many circles, but just a demonstration just to show you. I'm going to delete some of these. Just so it's easier to see on the screen. So now if I wanted to start to make some text, all these circles are considered their own objects, so I could start deleting some. You could either use a guide or you could just do it by hand. You could say, you know, a J usually, I might take out 3 of these, 3 lines of these, leave a couple lines, make the stem width a little bit bolder and 2 stones width apart. If I wanted to make a U, and so on. Just to understand, you know, what I mean. Make an L here. And so on. So that's one way that you could also make rhinestones. It's, you know, it's a boxy text, so your corners you could delete a stone here and there to round it off, to make that U a little bit more round. You know, use your imagination that way, but that is another easy way to make text in CorelDRAW for rhinestones if you don't have a program that automates it for you. When creating a multicolored design for rhinestones, the same rules apply for text or for objects that create a design or a custom design. When you are working with a program such as Corel and it's not an automated program that specifically simplifies making things for rhinestones, then there is a little bit more work involved, but this is how you would set up for a multicolored design to successfully make a rhinestone template. So I'm going to show you with just basic text because the same rules apply. So I have on my screen a word. To start making the stones, first I want to make sure that I understand which stone size or hole size I need to make in CorelDRAW. So I'm going to be using the SS10 stone size. So it's telling me for rhinestones my hole size is 3.1 millimeters. So now I know that I can make the correct circle size so that the stone falls correctly in place after it's cut off the stencil material. So to make my circle, I just use my ellipse tool and simply click and drag my mouse and then type in the size that I need, 3.1 millimeters. Then I make a duplicate of the circle by left clicking my mouse, dragging, right clicking my mouse, and then use my blend tool to blend from one stone to the other. And tell Corel that I want the path of my blended objects to be this warriors. And I want it to blend along the full path. And then I have to say how many objects I want within that path. So let's see what 150 stones, which isn't enough. So maybe 200. And I'm looking for, you know, a decent amount of distance between the stones. I don't want too much distance between the stones, but I don't want them too close together either, because the actual blade will cut through the stencil material and the stones could get caught up on that. And I do have other tutorials online that show putting text on a path and broken up in segments, more in-depth explanation so that the text looks a little bit more cleaner, easier to read with a bunch of stones creating what it looks like. As you can see, some of these stones aren't falling correctly right on the edges of the corners. So there will be some editing needed to clean up this file. But for demonstration, I'm just setting up for a multicolored design. We'll use this as a demonstration. I may want to fill it in as well, depending on how I would like to proceed with my design. So now I need to make a second layer, and I'm simply going to do that by using my interactive contour tool. That's the easiest way to make a two color in text or any object. So if I select the word, which is just an object, and I select my interactive contour tool, I can say I want it to create an additional layer to the outside. So at the top here I have options inside to center, but I want it to go to the outside. And I want it to go a certain, so many layers. I have contour steps here. I can make multiple layers to the outside, but I actually just want to do one. And then within the contour offset box, I can say how much distance I want between the layers. So I'm going to say I want 0.3. You want a good amount of distance because, of course, you have to accommodate the stone width. Plus, if you want a gap between the colors of stones, that may affect how much of a distance you want between the two objects. Now I have to break away that contour group. So I go to Arrange and break contour group apart. So now it's considered its own layer, its own object. And I can assign it its own color. And then I can do the same. And let's say if I'm using a different size stone, then I want to reference, say I want to do an SS16 on the outer rim, that it's a 4.3 millimeter hole. So I want to make sure that I make my circle 4.3 millimeters. Make a duplicate by clicking on the original circle, dragging and right-clicking my mouse, and then using my blend tool to make a blend between the two objects. Now the new path for these circles is this green line. And I want it to blend along the entire path. And I'm going to need more stones than that. It's way too many stones. They're overlapping. So let's see, 175. Still too close. Let's try 150. And that's pretty cool because most of the stones are falling within the corner. So I got kind of lucky with that one. The inner part of the warriors is a different story though. So first, let's just do some minor cleaning up just to show for reference, and then get the file set up to actually cut in stencil material. So first, this green layer here is its own layer, its own color. They're going to be completely different color stones, so I need to separate it from the original. And then I can focus on getting it ready to cut just that layer. So I want to break away the stones from the path because this line that we were using as a path, actually you don't want to cut. So if I select the stones, my status bar at the bottom of the screen will say Blend on Path Group on Layer 1. So now I have an option under Arrange to break that blend apart. So now I can click off my object and then select the line of the path that the stones were following and just simply delete it. Hit delete on my keyboard. And then here's a good example of a circle two circles that are overlapping, so you will have to pay attention to that. So now I want to treat each individual circle on its own. So if I select the circles and go to Arrange, I can ungroup all and then start treating circles as their own. I can start moving them around, deleting them if I have to. I may just want to get rid of that one altogether and then move this one up. Just depending on what you need to do to make sure that this file will cut correctly. And it's simply just selecting certain parts of the design and getting rid of anything that's going to cause conflict in production. So I'm just going around and deleting some circles that are overlapping. And I would get more in depth into, if I actually were going to produce this design a little bit more in depth, I may actually have broken up every single line in the first place and created paths along each individual segment to get more crisp, clean lines with corners that are always have a stone on the edge to show definition of the wording or the object. But just to show that we need to break up these layers in general for multicolored design is the purpose of this tutorial. So now that I've broken everything up, and let's say I cleaned everything, I can recombine the layer. So if I just go to my combine, or you can go to arrange and combine, however you want to get to that process. And then I'm just going to assign it again a color just to get a visual. And then at this point, I would want this to be its own file. So I would get rid of this Warriors. You know, I would clean that one up as well. But in regards to this color of stone on this design, I'd want to send this file to the cutter by itself and then put it on cut it off the stencil material, put it on the stencil backer board, and then brush in whatever color stones I want for that outline only, and then mask that and pull up the mask that only has that color stones on it. And then for the inner part of Warriors, I would do the same process. I would send just that part of the file to the cutter and brush that color into that wording, and then I would line up the inner part of the Warriors inside of the outer part of the Warriors, and that would create one transfer that has multiple colored designs.